Welcome back to the Public Relations Podcast. I'm at the university at the moment, and I was just talking to someone about Jimmy Kimmel, and we were talking about the way that it was handled from the point of view of the messaging around it. And I think it is a really interesting example of strategic communications, and I just wanted to cover it today in the podcast and just kind of cover some of my thoughts on this, because I haven't seen an awful lot of people talking about the strategic side of the way it was handled by Disney and the TV networks, compared to the way that it's been very well covered from a political point of view. If you're watching this on video, I'm just sitting down to sort of say a few thoughts on this. So the first thing is that Jimmy Kimmel is the late night talk show host in the United States, if you don't know, who made some comments ahead of the Charlie Kirk funeral. This, remember, is the political activist in the United States who was murdered. And he made some comments in the show, which, whether you agree with them or not, and as always with the Public Relations Podcast, we don't talk about politics here, we talk about strategic comms. And he made some comments which upset a lot of people. And it immediately drew a lot of attention, and what you saw was that the networks cancelled the show, and what they said was they put out a statement to say that his show was cancelled indefinitely. Now, if you think about it, what they did there was that they immediately basically killed the debate around it. There was no longer a debate about whether he should be axed. There was no attention being drawn away from the funeral. There was nothing for those who don't like Kimmel to attack him on, because the thing had been done. He'd been axed. It was over. It was finished. So it stopped it becoming something that was focused on or talked about at the funeral itself, where if they hadn't done that, it would almost certainly have come up. There would have probably been calls for him to be axed, and it would have kept the anger going. Now, that funeral happened last weekend, and shortly after that, he was reinstated. So first of all, what they did was they killed the story by saying that he'd been axed. But I'm pretty sure they'd already decided they were going to bring him back. And then what you saw was, after the funeral weekend, you then saw how all of a sudden there was all this stuff about celebrities of all sorts, even people on the right and left of politics, saying how he should be allowed to come back and how he shouldn't be blocked from doing a show, freedom of speech and stuff like this. And there was a whole line of people. And it was announced that he was indeed going to come back just a couple of days later. And he started his show again, was it last night or the night before? I can't remember now. And he started off with his opening monologue, which was an interesting mix of sort of lightheartedness. But one of the things he did was he listed, and clearly deliberately listed, a whole lot of names, including people who would be seen as his political opponents, who were supporting the idea of him coming back. So it's pretty obvious the messaging of doing that. He's basically saying, look, loads of people asked for me to come back. It wasn't my ego, it wasn't the network, it was other people who were asking me to return. And then he acknowledged both sides of it. There was also the bit where he started to tear up, where he talked about the fact that he never wanted to raise questions over the murder of a young man. Now, I don't know. I mean, it's very hard to tell when you get a very professional celebrity like Jimmy Kimmel, who's got an immense amount of experience, as to how much he felt that emotion, how much he felt he needed to show that emotion. But you can't help but say that when you watch that from a messaging point of view, having those tears added weight to it. And you saw very soon after that a lot of the narrative online, certainly from his supporters, saying that this showed his sort of genuine remorse and upset about how he kind of said things that he didn't intend to say, and he was upset about how it had been received. But I think the important point here is that when you look at what happened over the past few days, the way he was axed indefinitely and then brought back, but with very clear messaging along the way, you can see how it avoided all that extra bad publicity at the funeral and all that attention being drawn to the network, and then how they then rebuilt him within a few days to bring him back. You know, a lot of the time when people say something or do something, you know, I mean, the classic is like sort of, and okay, it's a different situation, but like Will Smith when he slapped Chris Rock at the Oscars. When that happened, You know, Will Smith went away for a while before he started to rebuild, and here with Kimmel, they obviously felt they got enough support to be able to bring him back a lot sooner than that. But it's really interesting to see how that clear messaging was done. Axe him so that the attention couldn't be drawn on the day of the funeral, and then bring him back the next week with lots of support to show that he should come back. So then you have to ask yourself the question, okay, well, how can you utilize what we're seeing here? How does this help me if I'm in a small charity, or if I'm in a major corporation or a growing business or whatever? How can I utilize this? And the key thing that I think you can take away from this, and this always comes back, in fact, when you look at any campaigns or anything that you're doing which is involved in an evolving situation, maybe not quite as dramatically as the sort of American political situation at the moment, but any situation you're in, whatever it is you're in, things are changing. You can't just come up with a plan and say, we're going to stick with this for 6 months. You've got to be adapting based on what the current attitudes are, what people are talking about it, what is going to trigger people, what is going to excite them. And you've got to be aware of that. This is why we've got platforms like Brandwatch or Meltwater or anything, like that, or Darwin, which are increasingly able to help us actually pick the right moments to do these things. So the point is to be flexible, to look at what the current narrative is, because it could be different tomorrow, and then to adapt what you're saying to that. Now here, they clearly changed it. Now, it's not often you're going to get a situation where you change your messaging from we're axing someone to bring them back within a few days, admittedly. But the point is still there. They read the room. They thought about the impact of what they said and what impact that would have, how that would change events at that time. And then they realized that a few days on, by slightly rebranding the message, by bringing in all these supporters and all that, and bringing him back, they were able to create a different narrative, and there wasn't the opportunity, that focus. The main news hook had been on the funeral. And so it was an opportunity to bring him back with more limited negative effects. Now, some of the networks that used to carry him aren't carrying him anymore, but the majority are. And you wouldn't be surprised if once the sort of controversy has died down, if those other ones return as well. So it's all about timing ultimately, and it's about matching that message into where things are right now. You're listening to the Public Relations Podcast. I'm walking home from the university. If you want to reach out to me, you can. LinkedIn is the place to do it. Reach out to me, Richard Midson, Midson, or of course you can find all the details on the website. I feel like I'm reading out an advert now. On the website at thepublicrelationspodcast.com.